If you think you've seen the worst of neighborhood drama, wait until you hear about Karen and her obsession with fences. It wasn't the screaming kind of drama that erupts in apartment hallways or the subtle, passive-aggressive shade of Christmas. Card snubs. No, this was a slow burn, something far more insidious. It unfolded in a quiet cul-de-sac nestled in the heart of suburban normalcy, where the hum of sprinklers and the occasional bark of a golden retriever were as wild as things got. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved from driveways. HOA newsletters were laminated, and privacy was treasured almost as deeply as well-manicured lawns. Everything changed when the Wilsons moved in. A young couple with 2 kids, a Labrador named Tofu, and an enthusiasm for backyard barbecues, they were the sort of people who always offered to help unload groceries and waved at every passing car. The house they bought had been empty for while left in disrepair by its last owner, so the Wilsons jumped into renovations quickly. New siding, a fresh coat of paint, new garden beds, and a fence. Not just any fence. A tall, elegant, professionally installed cedarwood fence that stretched around their backyard like a protective arm. At 6.5 feet tall, it was fully legal according to city zoning laws, but it towered over most of the knee-high vinyl barriers that lined other yards. It wasn't an eyesore. In fact, it was beautiful, clean, and smelled of fresh timber. But to Karen, who lived directly next door, it may as well have been a fortress wall, and she did not like being on the outside of anything. Karen had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade. She saw herself as something of a steward of community standards. Self-appointed, perhaps, but vigilant. She had opinions about everyone's lawn care routine, garbage day compliance, and even the type of wind chimes people used. When she saw the Wilsons' fence go up, she stood on her porch, arms crossed, lips pursed, the way a hawk might study a field mouse making a bold move. She watched the workers install the panels one by one, her judgment growing heavier with each clank of the nail gun. And when it was finally done, when the last panel was set in place and the Wilsons clapped with pride, Karen made her move. It was a Monday morning, warm but breezy. The Wilsons were sitting on their porch drinking coffee, basking in their hard work, when Karen strolled up their walkway holding a thick, overstuffed folder. Her steps were precise, her smile strained, like someone attending a party she wasn't invited to, but was determined to dominate. "Good morning," she said in that tone that made you feel like you'd already disappointed her somehow. "Hi, Karen," Rachel Wilson replied, rising from her seat. Her husband Mike followed suit, both still smiling, slightly confused but polite. Karen wasted no time. "I wanted to have a word about the structure you've erected." Rachel blinked. "You mean the fence?" "Yes." "That wall," Karen emphasized, flipping open the folder. "Now, I did a little research last night, and according to the municipal code, fences over 6 feet can be considered disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics. This," she gestured dramatically toward the fence, "is clearly blocking the open, friendly feel of the block." Mike looked genuinely puzzled. "We checked the regulations before building it. 6.5 feet is still within the allowed limit." Karen gave a tight-lipped nod. "Perhaps technically, yes, but it's the principle. Our backyards are communal in spirit, if not in law. Blocking off your yard sends the wrong message. It says, stay out. We want nothing to do with our neighbors." Rachel glanced at the fence and then back at Karen. "We really just wanted some privacy for our kids. They play back there, and we thought a taller fence would help with noise and safety. We didn't." "Mean to offend anyone?" Karen raised her brows. "A fence is a funny thing. It doesn't need intent to exist." Mike smiled as patiently as he could. "We appreciate your concerns, Karen, but we checked with the city and the HOA. Everything's within regulation. We're happy to show you the paperwork if that helps." Karen snapped her folder shut. "No need. I'll be following up with the HOA myself. They may be interested in revisiting the topic of fence height. Sometimes codes are due for a refresh." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back across her lawn. The Wilsons exchanged looks, half amused, half stunned. "Did that just happen?" Rachel asked. "Oh yeah," Mike said. That happened. They went back to their porch and tried to enjoy their coffee, though the moment had soured. The sense of satisfaction from their weekend work had dimmed under the weight of neighborhood politics, and though they didn't know it yet, they were just beginning their unintentional feud with Karen, the woman who believed fences didn't just make good neighbors, but made for something to control. Over the next few days, Karen made herself very visible. She stood near the fence when she watered her plants, always sighing loudly or muttering vague comments about sunlight being stolen or views being obstructed. She flagged down the mailman and asked if he thought the new neighbors seemed secretive. She even began taking notes, literal notes, on a clipboard that she carried on her morning walks. When nothing immediate happened, Karen grew more persistent. She attended the next HOA meeting with a PowerPoint presentation titled, "When Fences Divide More Than Yards, a Call for Neighborhood Unity." It featured stock images of smiling families playing in shared backyards and concluded with a dramatic slide of the Wilsons' fence, underlined with the phrase, "Is this what we want?" The HOA, comprised of 3 retirees and a bored stay-at-home dad, barely stifled their laughter. They thanked Karen for her concern, assured her the fence was within regulation, and moved on to the next item on the agenda, choosing the design for the annual block party flyer. Karen left the meeting with a forced smile and clenched fists. She had not won, but she wasn't done either. If she couldn't get the fence lowered through the rules, she would find another way. And that was when the ladders began to appear. A week passed after the HOA meeting, and Karen was seething beneath her composed exterior. Her PowerPoint presentation had been met with polite nods, some bored stares, and one audible chuckle when she'd compared the Wilsons' fence to the Berlin Wall. She had entered the room expecting to be seen as a visionary of neighborhood harmony. Instead, she'd been dismissed like a character from a sitcom, well-meaning perhaps, but ultimately unhinged. That did not sit well with Karen. She spent the next few days reorganizing her folder, printing out more copies of municipal zoning laws, and even digging up a faded architectural map of the cul-de-sac she found in an old filing cabinet. Her Google search history filled with terms like neighborhood legal loopholes and how to get a fence removed legally. But each link she clicked led to the same conclusion. The Wilsons were within their rights. That's when her mission changed. She no longer aimed to remove the fence. Now she simply wanted to see over it. The first ladder appeared early on a Tuesday morning. The neighbors across the street noticed it as they walked their poodle, Baxter. It was silver, weathered, and leaned just a little too comfortably against the edge of Karen's side yard, mere inches from the Wilsons' cedar fortress. At first, they thought Karen was doing repairs. She did, after all, have a habit of re-caulking her window trims twice a year. But then she climbed it. There she was, 7:42 a.m., in her house slippers, gripping a pair of binoculars and peering into the Wilsons' yard like a birdwatcher in the wild. Her robe flapped in the breeze, revealing pajama pants with tiny coffee, mugs printed on them. She looked like a spy, or at least someone pretending very hard to be one. The Wilsons, unaware of the peeping happening above their hedge, were inside making waffles with their kids. It wasn't until Mike stepped outside to take out the trash that he noticed the odd silhouette perched above the fence line. He stared. Karen stared back. Neither said a word for a full 5 seconds. Then she offered a small, unsettling wave. Mike blinked. "Morning, Karen. Just getting a bit of fresh air," she called down, her voice chipper but tight. "On a ladder?" Karen lowered her binoculars. "The view from up here is spectacular. Did you know your dog digs under your tomato beds?" Mike looked at Tofu, who was now sitting innocently on the back porch. "I do now." That evening, Mike and Rachel sat in their living room, debating their next steps. Rachel was furious. "She's spying on us. This isn't normal behavior. I know, Mike replied, rubbing his temple. But if we confront her, she'll probably double down. You saw what happened with the HOA. She thrives on escalation. Rachel sighed. Maybe we should put up a taller fence. Mike chuckled dryly. At this rate, we'll build the Great Wall of Suburbia. They decided to call the police, not to report a crime, but to inquire about liability. Their biggest concern was if Karen fell off the ladder. The officer they spoke to was sympathetic, but unhelpful. If it's on her property, and she's not physically trespassing, there's not much we can do. But yeah, if she falls and lands on your side, it could get messy. Karen, meanwhile, had started making her ladder visits part of her daily routine. Mornings were for light observation and taking notes. Her clipboard now filled with vague descriptions like 2:34 p.m., loud laughter, possibly alcohol, and child screamed, unclear if in joy or distress. Afternoons were more leisurely. One day she brought up a folding chair and a pair of opera glasses. Another day she brought a sun hat, a bottle of iced tea, and a paperback novel. She read half of The Da Vinci Code up there, stopping only to make comments to herself about the Wilsons' lawn watering schedule. The neighbors were divided. Some found it hilarious. One teenager even started a TikTok account called Karen Watch, where he documented her ladder sessions with background music and hashtags. It gained followers fast. Others, like sweet old Mrs. Delgado from 3 houses down, were worried. This isn't good, she told Rachel one day. People don't go up ladders just to drink tea unless something's off. The HOA received multiple complaints, but they too were trapped in a bureaucratic shrug. She's on her own property, said the board president, a retiree who just wanted to spend his time golfing. We can't police ladder usage. So the Wilsons got creative. They planted fast-growing vines along the fence, hoping to obscure Karen's view. She responded by buying a taller stepladder. They bought a canvas canopy for extra privacy. She got binoculars with night vision settings, just in case there were suspicious activities after dusk. Things reached a new level of absurdity when Karen brought her dog, a fluffy white Shih Tzu named Muffin, up the ladder with her. Balancing him on one arm and her phone in the other, she narrated live reports about the Wilsons' yard to whoever was on the other end of the call. They're using a propane grill again, she whispered. That's the 3rd time this week. Unusual, don't you think? From the Wilsons' kitchen window, Rachel stood watching in disbelief. She's got the dog now, she muttered. Mike joined her, peering out. We're living in a reality show. Rachel grabbed her phone and snapped a picture. If she falls, I want documentation. Karen remained unbothered by the growing attention. If anything, she seemed invigorated by it. She'd taken to calling. Her ladder set up her observation deck and told anyone who would listen that she was protecting the neighborhood from suspicious behavior. It's not spying, she said one day to a neighbor who raised an eyebrow. It's vigilance. There's a difference. But Karen was deluded. What began as a petty grudge had spiraled into full-blown surveillance, driven by paranoia and pride. The fence hadn't just blocked her view. It had triggered something deeper, a need to control, to assert, to win. And if that meant sitting atop a ladder for hours every day like some suburban sentinel, so be it. Yet the truth was clear to everyone else. She wasn't keeping an eye on the Wilsons. She was exposing herself to the entire neighborhood, one rung at a time. Karen's obsession with the Wilsons' backyard became less of a secret and more of a community spectacle with each passing day. What started as a single ladder and some binoculars had ballooned into something surreal. By now, most of the neighborhood had noticed the odd routine. At approximately 8 a.m. each morning, Karen would emerge from her home in activewear she never used for actual activity, wheel her ladder across her lawn to the same well-worn spot near the fence, and ascend like a queen to her perch. She no longer pretended to be casual about it. One morning, she set up a folding chair at the top of the ladder, complete with a seat cushion. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and a pair of oversized sunglasses, sipping from a stainless steel tumbler as if she were on vacation. Balanced precariously next to her was a small Bluetooth speaker, playing instrumental jazz at a volume low enough not to be a noise violation, but loud enough that the Wilsons could hear it whenever they stepped outside. To the untrained eye, it looked like a bizarre solo picnic staged several feet in the air. Rachel began avoiding her own backyard. What was once a sanctuary filled with laughter, toys, and peaceful Sunday afternoons had turned into a stage where every move felt observed. Mike tried to keep things normal, grilling dinner as usual, tossing a tennis ball to their dog Tofu, but it was impossible not to feel the eyes just beyond the fence. Their two kids, Ellie and Max, were the most visibly affected. Ellie, age 7, refused to play on the swing set anymore. "She's always watching," she told Rachel, clutching her stuffed dinosaur. "Even when I'm not doing anything." Rachel hugged her daughter tightly and felt a wave of helpless anger. "It's okay, sweetie. We're going to figure this out." They debated installing security cameras, not to record Karen, though it might have helped, but to prove to themselves that their paranoia was valid. They already had a binder of photos, Karen sitting on her ladder with a thermos, Karen holding Muffin like a baby as she pointed her phone toward the fence, Karen holding up a long, thin selfie stick topped with a GoPro. That one, Rachel admitted, nearly made her scream. The tipping point came one bright Saturday afternoon. The Wilsons were hosting a small birthday party for Max, who had just turned 5. A few kids from school, some neighbors, balloons tied to the fence posts, and a bounce house shaped like a pirate ship. Laughter filled the air as kids sprinted around in face paint and foam swords. Rachel allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment. That moment ended when a neighbor gasped. "Oh my God, is she serious?" Rachel turned to see Karen on the ladder again, but this time she had brought snacks. A Tupperware container sat beside her on the top step, and she was eating baby carrots like she was at a sports game. In one hand, she held her phone, angled downward. She was filming. Rachel stormed over to the fence. "Karen, are you recording my son's birthday party?" Karen didn't even flinch. "It's a public event. The noise carries. I have a right to document disturbances." Disturbances? Rachel could barely keep her voice level. "They're 5-year-olds. They're laughing." Karen shrugged. "I just think it's odd how often you have visitors. All these children coming and going. If something happens, I want to be able to say I was paying attention." Mike appeared behind Rachel, jaw clenched. "This ends now. You're crossing a line." Karen adjusted her sun hat. "What line? I'm on my property. You can't stop me from using my yard." Rachel raised her phone and took a long video of Karen, zoomed in on the ladder, her phone, the Tupperware of carrots, and her smug, sunglasses-covered face. "We'll see what the police think." Karen didn't respond. She simply adjusted her seat and resumed chewing. The police were called. This time, 2 officers arrived in a squad car and walked slowly to Karen's driveway, where she had just climbed down to let Muffin relieve himself. She greeted them with a forced smile and a practiced look of innocence. "Yes, officers. Can I help you?" The taller one gestured toward the ladder. "We've had multiple complaints about you recording your neighbors and their kids. Is that accurate?" Karen raised her eyebrows. "I don't know about recording. I've certainly documented what I've observed. That's not illegal." The second officer folded his arms. "You're perched above a fence looking directly into private property. There's a line between curiosity and surveillance." Karen's voice tightened. "I have reason to believe illicit behavior might be occurring." "Such as?" the taller officer asked. Karen hesitated. "Excessive noise, suspicious gatherings. A lot of propane usage." The officers exchanged a glance. "Ma'am, that's not illegal." "Well, not yet," Karen muttered. The conversation ended with a warning. No arrest, no ticket, but they advised her to keep things neighborly and reminded her that continued behavior could result in harassment charges. Still, Karen remained undeterred. She scaled the ladder again the next day, though now with visibly less smugness. Her sunglasses were gone. Her music was silent. For the first time, she looked uneasy, shifting her weight on each step, as if reconsidering her life choices. That same afternoon, the universe decided to intervene. It was around 3 p.m. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows across lawns. Karen, armed with her phone, her clipboard, and a new cold brew coffee, climbed the ladder with Muffin tucked under one arm. She reached the top and tried to settle in. Muffin, however, had other plans. Perhaps startled by a squirrel or by the screech of a nearby hawk, he squirmed suddenly. Karen lost balance trying to steady him, and in a moment that seemed to stretch forever, her foot slipped. Her clipboard flew first, landing with a soft thud in a bed of petunias. Then came her phone. Then Karen. The sound was a mix of crackling branches and a human oof as she landed awkwardly in the Wilsons' flower garden. The fence had indeed won. Rachel rushed out first, followed by Mike, who was already dialing 911. Karen lay stunned, staring up at the sky, one shoe missing, and her sun hat lying several feet away like a fallen crown. Muffin was sitting dazed beside her. I think I twisted something. Karen groaned. Mike gently knelt beside her. Don't move. Help's on the way. To her credit, Karen didn't protest. She didn't blame anyone. She didn't mutter about zoning laws or property lines. For the first time since the fence had gone up, she was silent. As the ambulance pulled into the cul-de-sac and the neighbors watched from behind curtains, there was no joy in the fall, no schadenfreude, just a quiet understanding that something had snapped. And maybe it wasn't just her ankle. Something was going to change after this. Everyone felt it, even Karen. Karen's fall made headlines, at least in the world of suburban gossip. The whole cul-de-sac buzzed for days. Some neighbors whispered about it while watering their lawns, others openly discussed it at the local coffee shop. The teenager behind the Karen Watch TikTok channel posted a short, respectful clip with text that read, "The ladder is down. Wishing her a swift recovery." It got thousands of likes. Karen returned home 3 days after the incident, her right foot in a clunky orthopedic boot and her pride in worse shape. Her daughter, who lived 2 towns over and had rarely visited, came to stay for a week, a silent signal that the family was finally aware things had gotten out of hand. They made no public statements, but the ladder disappeared from the side yard. The binoculars were no longer seen dangling from the back porch hook. Even Muffin seemed quieter, less yappy. The daily patrols, the observations, the clipboard entries, all vanished. The Wilsons weren't sure how to react. Part of them felt relief. The ever-present tension had lifted. Rachel could finally let the kids play in the backyard again without feeling like they were being filmed for some twisted reality show. Max resumed his pirate ship adventures. Ellie made chalk drawings on the patio. The backyard came alive again, filled with the sounds of water balloons and laughter instead of suspicion. And yet, a part of Rachel remained cautious. "She's still next door," she told Mike one evening while they watched the sunset from their deck. "This doesn't just go away." Mike nodded. "But it's different now. She flew too close to the sun. That fall did something." Karen spent the next few weeks indoors. The only glimpses anyone got of her were through her living room window, where she'd sometimes sit in a recliner with her leg propped up and a stack of magazines beside her. She looked smaller somehow, not just physically, but in presence. The woman who had once ruled the street with passive-aggressive notes and HOA regulation printouts now barely nodded when neighbors passed by. Eventually, she did venture out again, boot replaced by a cane. She wore oversized sunglasses, not out of defiance this time, but perhaps to hide from the world she'd once tried to monitor so closely. She started walking Muffin during quiet hours, early morning or late evening, always keeping to her side of the street. She didn't greet anyone, and no one greeted her. Then came the community BBQ, a yearly tradition hosted by the Thompsons 3 houses down. Everyone came, kids, grandparents, teenagers with Bluetooth speakers clipped to their belts. There were games, food trucks, lawn chairs, and old playlists full of 90s pop. Rachel and Mike debated attending at first. "What if she shows up?" Rachel asked. "She won't," Mike said. "But if she does, let her come. We have nothing to be ashamed of." They went. The kids had a blast. Tofu got his own paper plate of hot dogs, and for the first time in months, things felt normal again. And then Karen arrived. Not dramatically. Not in her usual statement way, dressed to either impress or protest. She walked in quietly, without her clipboard, without her phone out, just holding a tray of lemon bars. She placed them on the dessert table and gave a stiff, polite nod to the host before turning to leave. It was Rachel who stopped her. "Karen," she said, not loudly, but clearly. Karen turned, her face unreadable behind the dark glasses. "Yes?" There was a beat of silence. Then Rachel stepped forward. "Thank you for the lemon bars." Karen's lip twitched. "They're store-bought. I'm not supposed to bake right now." Another pause. Neither woman seemed sure what would come next. But then, unexpectedly, Karen added, "I wanted to apologize." Rachel blinked. She hadn't expected that. I think I got a little carried away," Karen continued. "The fence thing. The ladder. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood. Turns out I was just angry. About things that had nothing to do with you." Rachel nodded slowly. "We were just trying to have a little privacy." "I know," Karen said. "And I made that impossible. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even entirely comfortable. But it was honest." For the first time, Karen looked less like a caricature and more like a person, wounded in more ways than a twisted ankle. The neighborhood had mocked her, yes, but behind the mockery was always a quiet fear. What if we all lose ourselves to petty battles and forget how to be neighbors? "Apology accepted," Rachel said finally. She offered a small smile. "Just maybe no more ladders?" Karen let out a short, sheepish laugh. "Trust me, I'm done with heights." Word spread quickly after that. Karen had apologized, at the BBQ, with lemon bars. She didn't stay long, but she didn't need to. That brief interaction changed everything. She became less of a pariah, and more of a curious mystery. Someone to be pitied a little, perhaps, but not hated. Weeks later, Rachel noticed something odd on their fence. A hanging planter. A small, lovely arrangement of petunias and ivy. There was a note attached. "For your garden, thank you for your patience. K." Rachel smiled, then went inside to find a pen. She wrote back on the same paper, flipped it over, and tucked it into the planter. "Next time, just knock." And that was the end of it. Not in a grand, cinematic way, but in the way most real stories end. With growth. With people finding a sliver of grace between the absurdity. The fence stayed up. The Wilsons kept their privacy. Karen kept her distance. But something had changed. Something human. Something forgiving. And for the first time in a long time, the neighborhood was whole again.